My name is Victor Fuhrman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me now and we will explore these topics and so much more with fascinating guests, authors, and experts who will guide us to Destination Unlimited. According to ufologists, we are closer than ever to the disclosure that extraterrestrial beings have been visiting us since time immemorial and that they are present with us now. Much about ET contacts have come through hypnotic regression sessions with contactees and those who considered themselves abductees. What may we learn from these sessions, and will this contribute to ultimate full disclosure? My guest this week on Destination Unlimited, certified clinical hypnotherapist Lesley Mitchell-Clarke, has helped numerous ET experiencers get in touch with repressed memories and confirm their experiences. Lesley Mitchell-Clarke is a Toronto-based certified clinical hypnotherapist who specializes in several modalities, including working with individuals who feel that they have had experiences with extraterrestrial beings. Most of this fascinating work, as well as metaphysical therapies such as past life and interlife regression, takes place at Lesley's Toronto hypnosis clinic, Lightwork Hypnosis. Prior to her work in hypnotherapy, Lesley had a busy career as an actor, dancer, vocalist, and for the past 20 years, she's also been a top jazz and arts media consultant with an array of Grammy and Juno-winning clients, as well as major jazz festivals and record labels. Her website is lightworkhypnosis.com, and she joins me this week to share her work and her book, Intersections, a true story of extraterrestrial contact. Please join me in welcoming to Destination Unlimited, Lesley Mitchell-Clarke. Welcome, Lesley.
Thank you so much. I am so very pleased to be here, and it's just a wonderful thing to be talking to you and being able to reach out to, I'm sure, your many, many wonderful peeps that are following your show and your other media outlets. So thank you so much for welcoming me today.
You're very welcome. Lesley, please share with our listeners your path before beginning your clinical hypnotherapy practice.
Well, my path was not necessarily an even trajectory, but what I would begin by saying is that I have always been involved in mental health care. When I was at university, I was very young at university. I was only 17. I supported myself through university by working all night as a psychiatric aide in a state mental hospital. And that was really my first exposure to mental health care. But I went on to get further accreditations, and I eventually became a psychiatric technician, which is in Canada, where I live now, we don't have that, but I suppose a psychiatric nurse would be the closest thing to that. But we also do therapy. So I was a psych tech, and even through my my many years in show business and working as a singer and whatsoever, when I wanted to stay at home or when I wanted a bit more security, I often worked in rehab facilities. And it was during that time because I'm dinosaurs roamed the earth when I was that age. So this is quite a while ago, but mental health care was absolutely plesiosauric. I mean, it was, we still had straitjackets, we had padded rooms, we would put people in hot tubs to calm them down. I mean, it really was unchanged since the turn of the the 19th century. But then psychotropic medications came in, and things like Thorazine and the very, very, very early antidepressants like Zoloft. And so it was, I got to see the advent of the chemical approach to the treatment of mental health. And honestly, that just looked like a big dartboard to me. Sometimes they got it right. Sometimes it was ineffective. And so I think my compassion for for treating people and relieving them of pain eventually, many years later, manifested in my work as a hypnotherapist. And the way it actually began is I mentioned that I had worked in the entertainment business for a very long time. And at a certain point, and it was around midlife, at a certain point, I was completely unfulfilled. I knew that there was a calling for me. I knew there was something else I should be doing. I was considering going back and getting my nursing license in Canada, which would have involved a lot of stuff. But at any rate, my dear husband, I've been married to just wonderful person for 31 years. My dear husband, as a present, bought me a past life regression with a hypnotherapist. And that experience, not only was it eye-opening in the sense of the experience and what I learned about myself, but I also knew I can do this. This is what I'm supposed to do. This is it. I found it. So not very long after that, I went back to school and I got my basic hypnosis practitioner license. And then, even then, for the first 4 or 5 years, while I was really honing my craft, I treated what you would consider mainstream issues, smoking cessation, weight loss, phobias, you name it, I did it. And then I went on for further training and eventually was certified in what we call metaphysical hypnosis, which includes past life regressions, interlife regressions, which we can talk about later, and also something that I prefer to call energy release, but it is sometimes called entity release. And, that goes against my grain a little bit. So I call it energy release. In other words, if you've been carrying around something negative, whether it has an intelligence or not, it's going once I come into the picture.
Absolutely.
So all of those modalities came into place, and then for some reason, I have always had an interest in ufology, and I have had my own experiences, and I began, as if by magic, to have people call every clinic where I was working saying, do you work with someone who's been an abductee, which would be the more commonly used word than another word I really don't like. But so I started being sent basically the clients or patients that no one else would treat. And it was a blessing. I can't even describe the kind of blessing it was, but again, I think it was part of the path. And it's kind of like when the hypnotherapist is ready, the the clients
appear.
will appear.
Absolutely.
And it was that kind of thing. And so very, very seriously, my focus and my work with experiencers began about 15 years ago. So that's about how long I have been really, really, I won't say exclusively because I do all kinds of hypnotherapy, but it is indeed the focus of my life.
Now, before we start talking about specifically the ET experience, are there those who cannot be hypnotized? And if so, how do you identify them?
I would have to say yes. Now, we in hypnosis, we generally say that 75 to 80% of all people can be hypnotized. And, bear in mind, we're all in a rather light state of hypnosis all the time. So even if you can't get somebody into a trance, it is still possible to influence them in a positive way. But I can tell very quickly if somebody is going to be a good hypnotic subject. And I would say the biggest part of that is the trust factor. Now, if you have someone in your chair who has had traumatic childhood experiences, who is involved in a lot of fear-based activity, and of course, this does happen with experiencers too. They will come in as people who are afraid to sleep. So I can usually get most people into a very, very good trance by engendering trust and acceptance. So most of the time, it's only very rare for me now these days that I cannot relax someone to the point where I can actually, do hypnosis. And basically, hypnosis is 6,000 years old, Victor. I mean, or if you consider the possibility of antediluvian, pre-flood civilizations, it's older than that. It's the ancient knowledge of the mind-body connection that we form reality. Reality does not form us. And that we can, if I can access the subconscious mind, if I can get the physical body relaxed enough, then that little membrane or curtain or whatever you wish to call it that separates the conscious mind from the biggest part of ourself, the subconscious mind, I can pull that aside and dissolve it. And I can talk right to the subconscious mind where all memories, all experiences are stored from all lifetimes.
Your book with Wes Roberts, Intersection, A True Story of Extraterrestrial Contact, documents several of the sessions you had with Wes beginning in 2011. How did this unfold?
Well, Wes Roberts, just a lovely person, by the way. He is a highly educated college professor, and he first came to me, and he was so fearful, so nervous. He could hardly even look me in the eye. And he had all of the classic things going on that we see with experiencers: missing time, bizarre, half-remembered things that involve, screen memories or God knows what. He was unable to sleep. He was a complete insomniac. He was afraid to close his eyes for fear of what was going to happen next. And these events had been happening to him. We later came to find out that these events that he interpreted as an adult experience went back to, the age of 3 or earlier.
And was his experience comparable to that of other experiencers?
He has been yes, I would say that there were so many corollaries between the experiences that these individuals have. And, as you, I'm sure you've discussed many times with your guests, there are many, many, many different types of beings that we engage with. In fact, our former Secretary of Defense here in Canada, Paul Hellyer, he has become quite an advocate for disclosure, and he has said that the Canadian government regularly interfaces with, I think he said, 83 different species. So that's just to give you an idea about what's going on, sub rosa, what is going on between, the different governments and how involved they have been. And that's probably a whole nother show.
And yes, we'll actually talk about that. We'll actually briefly talk about that a little later in the interview. But getting back to Wes Roberts, give us an example of a session that you had with him.
Okay. So Wes Roberts has had one particular being that he has engaged with for all of his life. And he has seen many other members of this species too. Now, from what he's described to me and drawn for me, I would say they have to be, Pleiadian or Lyran or Arcturian. They do have the rather enlarged skulls, but they're very slender and they're blonde. So the particular beings that he engaged with were not at all terrifying. In fact, you would say they were almost beautiful beings. And he feels that he has a soul connection with this one individual that he calls his twin. And he also feels now, after these many years of going through his situation, he also feels that he lived in an incarnation as one of these beings, maybe more than once. So he has a special connection with these beings. Now, that is not to say that he did not have what we would call, disturbing experiences. Now, I will give you an example of something that he told me about in one of our early sessions. Now, again, we're talking about screen memories or staging, and what I have found that is especially when when children are abductees, when we're talking about the very beginnings of their experiences, it seems that the ETs, and this may involve several different varieties of ETs working together. This is something we have to keep in mind. There's a collaborative thing going on here, a positive thing. So they're very involved, the ETs, in making sure that the children aren't frightened. And this may sound bizarre, and sometimes they make terrible mistakes, but they really try. So in this particular experience, Wes was, I think he was about 12 years old, already, getting pretty surly and, rebellious, right? Kind of, a tween boy kind of thing. So the usual thing happened where he passed into unconsciousness. I believe he may have been aware of being levitated out of his room in that experience. And suddenly he found himself in, I think, what was supposed to be a children's birthday party. And he said all these chairs were set up in a circle. Some of the children he seemed to recognize. He said some of the children appeared to be out cold. I mean, their heads were tipped over. They were unconscious. Some of the children were completely conscious, and he was engaging with them in conversation. So this fake party is going on, and already, Wes doesn't like it. He doesn't like that he's been taken. He doesn't like what he's seeing. He doesn't like this childish thing. And of course, there are a lot of anachronistic things in that you will find in screen memories, because the ETs aren't perfect. So I remember him telling me that there was an old black dial phone, the kind that my grandparents would have had in their home. So some of the things that he was seeing were anachronistic. Now, then it was clear that there was some kind of examination of the children going on. And that's when he first started talking about the brown doctors. Now, from what I can gather, and because I've heard this from many other experiencers, the brown doctors, which I think may be even a form of reptilian. And remember, not all reptilians are bad or evil. So I think the brown doctors were disturbing enough that they didn't like the children to see them. So they're often wearing cloaks or hoods. But in this occasion, they were calling children into like a pediatrician's office, one after the other. And the brown doctor stuck his head out and was wearing a clown mask. Now, they probably didn't know that lots of people are disturbed by clowns. It's called onophobia. It's a very common phobia. And when Wes saw that clown mask, he just freaked out, and he turned over the table and he started yelling, and bang, zoom, within about 5 seconds, he was dropped down onto his bed. So they said, "You're out of here, Buster. You're not going with the projection. You're out of here." So sometimes his experiences would be a little bit contentious like that, when he would start to kick back. And that happened in the teenage years.
You use the term screen memory, which Sigmund Freud created or coined. What does that actually mean?
I think a very simple way to think of it would be a false setting created by some type of telepathy, shared telepathy. So in other words, they didn't want to scare these children that Wes was with by bringing them onto a ship. And although they were on a ship, but they didn't want to scare them by putting them in a medical setting. And so they, with the children in an altered consciousness, they were able to create an environment that they felt would help the children to feel safe and comfortable. So that is what I mean. And so this is they are telepathically, psychologically generated and projected environments designed for our comfort, but certainly not always perfect.
So it's almost like a holographic projection that the children or the contactees
Yes.
are exposed to.
Yes, that's probably an even more succinct way to say it, because in fact, holographic technology, as we understand it, is being used all the time with ETs. Where we get on Zoom, they project themselves and can appear three-dimensional, although they're not physically on the planet. They are really able to do that. And in fact, I'll just throw, as an example, I'll just throw this in here. One of my wonderful people that I've worked with for a long time, his name is Dory. He participated in the secret space program and has had a lifetime of experiences. And during his training, when he was involved in this program, he really bonded with an insectoid being of great kindness and intelligence that he calls Kern. Now, Kern never showed up physically, but Kern projected himself. So he would usually appear as if he was floating, and yet he was appeared very, very solid. But Carl would say knew that it was a projection. And I have heard about that over and over again. And I think about it for a minute. If you were in a physical body and you had to go through a lot of changes to move about in Earth atmosphere or any other kind of atmosphere, wouldn't it make a lot more sense to send an interactive hologram that can communicate in real time, like, just 10 steps beyond Zoom?
I wonder if this type of activity is actually what spawned the technology that humanity has created for avatars and virtual reality.
Oh, I think so. You know what I think about this, Victor? I think that every advanced technological civilization has had to pass through the things that we have had to pass through, the release of carbon fuels, moving into different sources of energy, and also communicating in a superluminal way that is faster than the speed of light, with the speed of thought. And I think that the internet and all of the associated technology that we're talking about, these are training wheels. These are training wheels. Eventually, I'll be able to sit in my living room and have a cup of coffee, and you're doing your show, and you'll just project yourself into my living room.
Will you have coffee for me?
I will. I'll make some virtual coffee even. So
wonderful. That's wonderful.
But I do think we're just on the crest of. Maybe. I think now we're at the point where maybe 63% of the planet is aware. And that's a majority. And that was a big thing, I believe, to the extraterrestrials, when we finally achieved a majority awareness.
Absolutely. Her book is called Intersections, A True Story of Extraterrestrial Contact. Lesley Mitchell-Clarke. Lesley, please tell our listeners where they can get your book and find out more about you.
Oh, thank you so much, Victor. My book is available on Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, and it's Intersections, A True Story of Extraterrestrial Contact, as you said. And I am eminently available on Facebook as Lesley Mitchell-Clarke, or my practice. You can look at my Facebook page, Lightwork Hypnosis. And for about the past dozen years, I've had a long-running program where I also interview, where Wes Roberts and I actually interview real who's who of the ufology and metaphysical communities, and that's called Contact TV. And you can look on Facebook under Our Contact TV, OUR Contact TV. So Facebook is good, and and you can always reach me by email at Lesley, Lesley at lightworkhypnosis.com.
And we'll be back with more of Lesley after these words on the OMTimes Radio Network.
The cutting edge of conscious radio, OMTimes Radio, IOM FM. OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
So I'm a cat, and I just moved in with this new human. And she's got this little toy she's always playing with, all day long. Tap, 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 bloop, bloop. She can't put it down. There it is. Oh, and get this. She even talks to it. Last week, she asked it for Chinese, and guess what? Egg rolls showed up. Like magic. Humans have cool toys.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this week, Lesley Mitchell-Clarke, her book, Intersections, A True Story of Extraterrestrial Contact. Lesley, how did you develop the techniques that you currently use in working with experiencers?
Well, everything that I do with experiencers, I owe to my mentor and teacher, Dr. Georgina Cannon. She is the great light of past life and interlife regression. She was a direct student of Michael Newton. And so what I did is I took the past life regression techniques that I had already been working with for many years, and I adapted them in my own way for use with experiencers. So because we have to, it's a regression process. So a serious trance is required. Now there are many levels of consciousness, right? But in hypnotherapy, we talk about 4 levels of trance. Level 1 is kind of what we walk around with. Level 2 is a light trance. Now I need to get the people I work with into at least a level 4 trance, which is the alpha state, and hopefully, at some time I also get them into an even deeper state than that. So, but at any rate, I have adapted past life regression techniques, and it involves a long, relaxing regression and a process of directed instructions where we move through an individual's life and get to the material that we're looking for. In other words, I might say something as when I have the person in trance, one of 2 things usually happens on a first session. I will either do my best to go to the memory of which they have the most conscious recollections. Or if that isn't what they want to do, I will often direct them to go to the first experience in their life of any strangeness in the nighttime. So I have to make it very, I have to really be vanilla. I can't put ideas into people's heads. I have to be so neutral that I suggest nothing. So, but by making gentle, neutral suggestions, I can almost always get people back to the earliest point of contact for them.
I know this is a sensitive area, but how do you vet actual experiencers from those with emotional issues?
I'm so glad that you asked that question. And as we talked about earlier, I have a great deal of experience of working with individuals who are suffering profound mental illness. So before anyone comes to see me for a regression, I will either meet with them on Zoom or on the phone, whatever's comfortable for them, and have a long discussion, probably about an hour. And during that time, I'm taking medical history. And by the end of that hour, I can be very sure if I'm talking to a poor soul who is having a dissociative disorder or confabulation or something like that. Now, often if they tell me about their medical history and that they have been hospitalized many times, that in itself is not enough for me to disregard them as an experiencer, because some people have very fragile mental mechanisms, and a fear experience can overload them, should I say, or trigger an imbalance in the brain that is later diagnosed as mental illness. Now, this does not happen very often. And in fact, you'd probably be surprised how rare it is, but it does happen. Now, so after my consultation, after I have a clear idea about what's going on, and if I feel the person is really having a mental health episode, in fact, usually it will be mixed up also with religious mania, or I don't know any other way, or fixation on religious aspects, and Jesus was talking to them and God was talking to them. Audio phenomena that is not in keeping with a telepathic experience, negative audio phenomena, all of these things play into my decision. So if I feel, I will be very tactful if I feel that person is not mentally healthy enough to work with hypnotherapy. Because in Canada, by the way, I'm legally barred from working with people who have had a diagnosis of a mental health illness. If someone is a diagnosed schizophrenic, unless I have a note from their psychiatrist, I am not allowed to work with people. So my practitioner insurance really depends on me being able to distinguish and perceive what is going on. So after I say, hypothetically, after I determine that this person is unwell, I have a number of psychiatrists, psychologists, and psychotherapists who are very open to the idea of ET contact. And I will refer them to one of those good people who are also able to legally work with them for any mental health issues.
We often hear the term sleep paralysis applied to those who believe they have had contact or other paranormal nocturnal manifestations. How may this be determined?
Well, I think sleep paralysis is really quite commonplace, and I think most of the time it's simply a physiological situation. Now, you know, Victor, that when we get ready to sleep, when we go into sleep, we release all kinds of chemicals into our system, melatonin, and we also release a neurological paralytic into our system. And of course, the reason for that, as we may only speculate, but that neurological paralytic prevents us from acting out our dreams, because the subconscious mind does not know the difference between reality and fantasy. Okay, so even a normal, healthy person, if we didn't have that chemical in our system that keeps us from flailing around and walking around and engaging in conversations and acting out our dreams, it would be a very, very bizarre world, for sure. So we release this natural paralytic. Now, two things can happen, and often in the teenage years, we find that teenagers come to consciousness a little bit before that paralytic completely wears off. And so that sensation of being unable to move is real. And also, along with the teenage years, you know, it's more likely to be a kind of a hypnagogic experience. In other words, more like the experience someone has in sleepwalking. So that too is common in adolescence. So the most of the cases of what you're talking about are simply the result of someone coming into full consciousness before those paralytic chemicals have completely worn off. Now that's situation one. But with our people, with my people, usually what has happened is they have been astral projecting. And I find, and many of my colleagues have found, that in later life, experiencers tend to be such good astral projectionists that they no longer need to travel to the craft physically to engage and do their jobs and interact and teach and all the things that they're doing in the nighttime hours. And so when their etheric body, or I actually call it the psychophysical body, when the psychophysical body comes in usually through the top of the head. And if you should come into physical consciousness before your etheric body and your physical body have really coalesced, then you will get that terrible sensation of not being able to move your body. And the fearfulness associated with it. And then, of course, many people who are experiencing what I would call just physiological sleep paralysis, they will often have nightmarish experiences. They're in a hypnagogic state, and that's where we get these things like, the hag sitting on their chest. I think these are largely physiological archetypes that happen in these situations.
Are contact experiences multi-generational?
I would have to say that everything that I have learned to this point certainly indicates a lack of randomization, and that certain lines of heredity are followed. And although it's very difficult sometimes to get at that information from our parents, my parents of the 50s and Catholic people of the 50s, they would say maybe angels visited me, right? It's very difficult to get those experiences sometimes from our senior family members, but it is very common for siblings to be taken together at the same time. And as in the case of Carl Dory, I'm going to bring him up again. Many of his early childhood experiences, it's he and his brother and his sister. And his brother started kicking up a fuss, and before long, he was the only one that they came for. So I believe that what they are looking for is really quite simple. I believe they are looking for beings who have psychic PSI skills and are able to communicate telepathically. And imagine if you were Margaret Mead or something, and you were studying primitive ape-like species, and there were maybe two of them that could make vocalizations and had esophagus and had a vocal system that had gone into the range of Homo sapien. Wouldn't you prefer to communicate with those two ape-like humans whose voice boxes could make verbal sounds?
Absolutely.
I think it's the same thing. I think that unless they are clumsy government implants, I think that any implants that have been received from the people I work with are kind of like step-up transformers. They're designed to stimulate, whether it's the pineal gland or whatever it is, stimulate that aspect of ourselves that is able to engage in nonverbal communication.
It seems like most of the experiences that people have start in childhood. What age range have you found the earliest contacts?
The earliest contacts that people can tell me about are usually around 2 or 3, but little ones don't have many words then. So, but yet that's about the earliest age that I believe children are taken, around 2 or 3. And however, that being said, there are some experiencers who have told me that their genetic makeup, their mother's ova, their father's sperm, had been upgraded, fiddled around with before they were born. So I have heard that.
How do these early experiences manifest later in life? Do the experiencers have issues with, for example, socialization and relationships?
Well, they certainly can. They certainly can, because many of these people are very fearful. they're not trusting, they can't sleep. So there are a lot of issues that happen to people, especially people who unfortunately have had experiences of the negative kind. And much more of this occurred with the Greys that were under the treaty with Truman. So this is a whole nother thing that we're going to have to spend another show to talk about. But what I would say is that what I am dealing with sometimes is a very specific type of PTSD. So really everything that you would associate with someone who was suffering, who had served in Afghanistan, all of those kinds of symptoms of PTSD, I have seen manifested with experiencers.
From your work, is there a typical contactee abductee?
I'm not going to say typical, but I would say that there are always commonalities. And the big commonality is psychic ability. And the experiencer phenomena, it crosses every single socioeconomic line, every single line of education, religious, cultural, racial affiliations. There have been some estimates. Now we know through MUFON, and by the way, I work directly with MUFON, with Kathleen Martin's Experiencer Research Project. Kathy Martin is the niece of the late Betty Hill, of Betty and Barney Hill. But I would say that, again, psychic ability is what is being sought out here because it simply makes things easier. And who knows? Also, I'm just going to throw this out there. There may be many of us on this planet who have a genetic history with extraterrestrial species. In fact, it's my belief that that ET DNA has been infused in us from day one. The 5 fingers of man. I think we have had DNA infusions from many different cultures that are extraterrestrial, if you will. And I think sometimes family lines are followed simply because certain beings are following in their way their cousins. I've heard them refer to us as their cousins. And there's an awful lot of speculation that type O negative blood, which is the first blood type recorded, and is now so rare. I have it. It's less than 1.5% of the population. I think that ancient blood grouping is belongs to the genetic interference or upgrading of the Anunnaki or some other sophisticated culture. It doesn't make any sense that there would be one humanoid blood type that does not include the rhesus gene.
My guest is Lesley Mitchell-Clarke. Her book is called Intersections, A True Story of Extraterrestrial Contact. We'll be back with more of Lesley after these words on the OMTimes Radio Network.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free, ascendinghearts.com.
Right now our country feels divided, but there's a place where people with different political views and life experiences are coming together through the power of conversation, and it feels good. Hear more at lovehasnolabels.com/one-small-step. A message from StoryCorps, Love Has No Labels, and the Ad Council.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this week, Lesley Mitchell-Clarke. Her book, Intersection, A True Story of Extraterrestrial Contact. Lesley, experiencers often share different races of ETs, such as Greys, Nordics, and reptilians. What types have your clients described?
Everything from reptilian beings, which the ones that there are there are benevolent reptilians that in fact are part of the Great Federation, where we have treaties with them. I've heard from Captain Randy Kramer. So reptilians, there have been beings that are even aquatic, that communicate telepathically. We have the beings called the brown doctors, which are unknown, but I feel they're another type of possible reptilian. Several different types of grays. The taller ones, who are always the bosses, the little minions, which I don't necessarily believe are fully biological. I think they have engineered space-worthy cybernetic beings, because you can't get much from them telepathically. The little small grays that seem to be doing the rudimentary things like going and taking people. So I think that we have those, and we have I experienced many different types of really close kin, I would say. There are Pleiadians and Lyrans that look so much like us and are so close that they pass amongst us. They can exist here and live here and mix about with us, and there's absolutely nothing that would let you believe that they were extraterrestrial. So the Pleiadians, the Lyrans, the Yael, the beings that Wes integrates with, I have never been able to get a name for those beings because they don't use names, they use vibrations. So that's another thing we have to talk about is everything is vibration. Manifesting that everything is vibration.
Absolutely. As I shared with you before we began recording the interview, my childhood experiences I considered to be night school. Have any of your clients referred to the ETs as benevolent teachers?
Oh, yes. Many. I have one wonderful client. She's written a book recently too. And she is one of those people that is very, very psychic, was selected out of her family, or her family was followed, her mother's psychic. And she used to talk about, she has one close, what does she call her? Is it Jackie? She's got a little funny nickname for her because she couldn't pronounce her name. But she is a Pleiadian who has red hair and has had a relationship with my client since she was tiny. It's very close. It's almost like a mother-daughter relationship. It's very close. So in her childhood, this wonderful benevolent lady would come and they'd walk out together into the backyard, and she had a kind of a little shuttlecraft. And, they'd get it, she'd get in, and they would go to the mothership or the bigger craft, and she would be taken there to engage with all the other little people. And they would be doing things. Some of it was virtual. They would be putting together cubes and putting together shapes with their mind virtually. The way she explained it, it was in fact a bit holographic the way it looked. It would be like a complete 4D representation, and they'd be moving boxes around and putting little shapes together. So there are all kinds of things like that. I remember one interesting one. I remember Carl Dory, again, who was in the secret space program. He, when he was like an adolescent, he was in a class on board a ship that was being taught by, he said, a lady that he thought looked like a gray humanoid hybrid. She had very little hair, but it was curly, but otherwise, she was not repulsive. She was, attractive, but had, the unusual almond-shaped eyes. So she was some type of a hybrid. And she taught a lot of the classes that he was involved in when he was being taken as a young adolescent. And he said one of the classes was all about reproduction and genetics, and how, in its simplified form, but like how and what they were doing to result in a hybridization program, as part of the hybridization program.
What have your clients shared with you about their interpretation of the ET agenda?
I would say in the beginning, when I first began working with individuals, and they have fear and mistrust, and they have missing memory. There's a lot of negative connotation that's put onto their experiences simply because they don't understand them and can't see all of them. Now, as we work together, my job, as I see it, is for that individual to be able to see more and more and more and understand more and more and more about their incredible value and their incredible role and importance in this in the awakening, for lack of a better term, and how special they are. So very often people come to me with low self-esteem, with fear, with inability to focus, a lot of symptoms of depression and anxiety. And by the time we are finished, they have been able to put themselves back in control. And so what is going on in their lives, they now perceive as a collaboration. So it's a question of personal power. They have maybe wrongly perceived these events as being enforced upon them when they're younger. And yet, when they're able to process all the activities and memories, they realize they're a collaborator, which puts a whole different spin on everything.
We have a few minutes left, and I just want to go a little bit down the rabbit hole with you. We're going to have you back on. There's so much more for us to talk about. But you mentioned the secret space program. What is it?
Well, many ufologists and myself, we accept the idea, and many of these ideas were put forth in a wonderful book called The Day After Roswell, written by Philip Corso. But certainly Len Kasten and many other people have evidentiary materials that are about to support what I'm about to tell you. So according to Captain Corso, or maybe Colonel Corso, it's a big deal. The Roswell crash was not really a crash in the sense that we think of it. We brought down 3 craft with some type of early sonic weapons. They were observing us, we disabled their craft, they crashed in 3 different places, and some of the beings were alive, at least for a time. Now, when that occurred, this particular group of grays, which I believe are the Zeta Reticulites, I believe they are the same group that came and were involved with Betty and Barney Hill. These grays, medium-sized grays, put forth a deal to President Truman and the chiefs of staff that if they could be allowed to take a certain amount of the human population and extract ova and sperm or what they needed and then put them back, that for the license to do that for a certain amount of years, they would exchange advanced technology that we did not have at the time. And of course, the agreement was set in time. I think it actually elapsed in the late 80s, but it was an agreement from, say, right after World War II, Cold War, and to maybe as much as 20 years ago. That's when it ended. Now you will notice that what they did, what happened after that, suddenly, 50s, 60s, 70s, huge upswing in reports of phenomena. So there was a lot of activity with this particular group. Now also, suddenly we have fiber optics. Suddenly we've got the solid transistor. Suddenly we've got Velcro. So that's, and what Philip Corso was directed to do is he was directed to open what they called the Department of Foreign Technology. Well, it was foreign, all right. And so nobody would get too powerful, and kind of a divide and conquer philosophy. They took this advanced technology and they distributed it around to various manufacturers. You guys at the Skunk Works, you get this. You guys at blah, 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 you get this. And so that's how the technology was able to be hidden, because it was hidden under a pile of paranoia about Russia.
And we're going to have to put some Velcro on that right now. One of the greatest inventions of all time, Velcro.
I love it. I love it.
My guest, Lesley Mitchell-Clarke, her book, Intersections, A True Story of Extraterrestrial Contact. Lesley, one more time, please tell our listeners where they can get your book and find out more about you.
Thank you, Victor. My book is available on Amazon.com, anywhere. If you're here in Canada, Amazon.ca. And you can find out all about me from going on Facebook, and you can look up Lesley Mitchell-Clarke or Lightwork Hypnosis or our Contact TV, and anything probably more than you ever wanted to know about me will be there. Or you could also visit my website, which is lightworkhypnosis.com. My website is having a little bit of a facelift. Actually, I need a facelift, but I'm starting with the website. And so the best place to get the most up-to-date info would be my Facebook pages.
Lesley, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing this truly fascinating material and your fascinating practice and all of the information you've gleaned. We have much, much more to talk about. You have to come back.
I am thrilled to come back and chat with you anytime that you will have me. And of course, I can't wait to see you back home in the Apple, and maybe I'll get some of my original accent back, because this Christopher Plummer thing has got to be annoying as hell.
Listen, when you come and visit us in New York, you and I are going to put on our best New York accents and just talk, New Yorkers. We'll
talk just like we talked when we was kids.
When we was kids in the neighborhoods. Yeah, in the hoods. Yeah. Lesley, thank you again. And thank you for joining us on Destination Unlimited. I'm Victor, the Voice Fuhrman. Have a wonderful week.